Okay, I was going to do something different today, but based on some conversations on Twitter yesterday, I decided to cover this. Canadian politics isn't as well understood in the rest of the world as perhaps it should be, and because I have a plurality of viewers in the US and Ireland and Germany and the UK that I am very grateful for, I thought I'd share a bit of news from my country because it is going to impact Canadian relations on the world stage. And that is our cabinet shuffle that just happened today, widely regarded to be a reaction to the incoming Trump administration in the US. And before I get to that, I want to say another thing I noticed. I think part of this cabinet shuffle is, okay, we've been in government for over a year now. We've sort of shown that we're not going to set everything on fire. We're not a bunch of kids throwing a big party while our parents are away. It's time for Trudeau to really take the reins and really have his cabinet be his cabinet. And so a couple of long-time Liberal members of Parliament, Stéphane Dion and John McCallum, have been moved out for Trudeau picks. And that's something that isn't getting a lot of attention because the big news is that Chrystia Freeland, a former journalist who is currently banned from traveling to Russia, is our new foreign affairs minister, meaning she is the one that is going to have to deal with Donald Trump. And it's important to note that it is general consensus is that every person who's been moved into one of these jobs is eminently qualified. The three new faces in cabinet were people that did well in sort of second in command or assistant positions, and so they've been moved up to basically have their own portfolios to reward merit, which is the way the system is supposed to work, right? The right person gets the job regardless of their gender, color, sexual orientation, religion, and so on. But that being said, Chrystia Freeland, her appointment is sending a big message because she was very effective as Minister of International Trade, which would have caused her to take on Trump as well. So they could have left her right where she was. And because Trump's threatening to tear up NAFTA, Trump's threatening, and people think of NAFTA as some beef with Mexico. NAFTA is a three-way trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And there have been numerous things in our press up here about how poorly Canada has fared under NAFTA and the free trade agreement prior to that. So they made a conscious decision to move her. And the other thing that's significant about Chrystia Freeland is shortly after she was appointed, she did a media tour in the U.S. because she was a journalist. She has, she's known in those circles. And so she did the, late night talk show circuit and all that stuff and did very, very well. The press was very positive. And so it's hitting on all thrusters, right? She's a woman. She's a former journalist. And Trump with the whole dishonest media and the whole woman thing, we all know his infamous comments on that hot mic. And she's barred from traveling to Russia because Canada took a principled stand over Crimea and Russia banned about a dozen Canadian journalists in retaliation. So, and she's popular with the U.S. media. This sends a strong signal about what Canada thinks of Donald Trump, and it basically comes across as a big old... And this is Justin Trudeau at his finest. He'll smile at you. He's got that shiny curly hair and that big dreamy smile and those sparkly gooey eyes. But he's also a boxer and he knows how to punch somebody in the face. Like, this is the guy. You never, ever underestimate Justin Trudeau because one of his biggest strengths is people tend to underestimate him and then he comes up and just sucker punches and drops him flat. Trudeau is not a perfect prime minister, but it's hard not to cheer a guy like that who is so comfortable being mocked for months and months and months, and then waiting and just taking his moments to throw a punch. And what's more Canadian than that? They were very polite, boom! That's Canada. But that's Chrystia Freeland. It's a major sign. It is. There's no denying that this is a message. But it's a subtle enough message that Trump isn't going to take to Twitter. It's not Meryl Streep being clear, he did this. It's statecraft. It's soft power. So it's very interesting. So Patty Hajdu then moves over to Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Labor, a woman with the labor portfolio. You'll notice her previous role was status of women. That's an interesting little symbolic thing as well. I'm not going to make too much about that. I'll see what she does. But then Maria Monsef is now the Minister of the Status of Women. Previously, she was Minister of Democratic Institutions. And this shuffle is not a surprise, but it's good that the Trudeau government kept Maria Monsef, because there was a breakdown in the major project that the Democratic Institutions portfolio had, which was to get together and figure out a plan for electoral reform. That was a big thing, that it was a part of the Trudeau platform while he ran. And there was a big controversy because Maria Monsef said very publicly that she did not feel that the committee did its job, that she wanted a plan, and they basically gave her a metric that shows how closely various systems of government connect to the popular vote. That was not what she asked for. And there was this big brouhaha, and she apologized and all that stuff. And this is one of these management style things where is stating your honest opinion in public good management? And I quite frankly don't know the answer. I'm always somebody who thinks that people should speak their minds. Sometimes it should be behind closed doors, but I don't like this overly cautious, let's parse everything so we don't offend anyone stuff. It's a big deal that this committee faltered, because it takes a long time to get any electoral reforms in place. And the concern here is that our number of seats in the in Parliament, in the House of Commons, which is our version of Congress, doesn't reflect the actual vote totals in the popular vote as much as it might. It's the equivalent concern to the fact that someone can win the Electoral College and not the popular vote. And there's a certain point where it's okay if it's a few thousand votes, it's close, but still. But when it's millions and millions of votes, like what happened in the US recently, some people think that's a sign that the system is broken. And so they did this committee to try to figure it out. And in Canada, when stuff doesn't get done, because our system is designed to get things done, our system is designed for continuity of government and a functioning government when there's disagreements, unlike the US system, which is designed to lock up if the various parties cannot agree. It's a very different structural system. And so when something doesn't get done in our government system, something is wrong. And so, you know, obviously they need to reset. Obviously, this means we may not actually get electoral reform. The Liberal government may have to break its campaign promise, not for lack of trying, just the committee kicked the can down the field. And I kind of, even though she apologized, she claims she was wrong. I give her credit for stating this was not sufficient. This was not good enough. And perhaps she should have said that to them and not to the whole of government and not to the press. But hindsight's 2020. You know, I think politicians should be able to get up there and say, I don't believe this committee did its job. But I'm going in circles now. The point is she got moved off that folder, but she didn't get moved out of government completely. She's now our new status of women minister. And this is significant for two reasons. One is the status of women portfolio was one that was gutted under the previous administration, under the Stephen Harper years. The offices for the status of women shrank notably. Offices were closed, programs were cut. It was one of the biggest bloodbaths outside of scientific government grants and environmental stuff during the Harper years. And so that's notable that she's basically getting a second chance to be effective. But Mariam Monsef was also the target of a minor birther movement. Mariam Monsef originally believed that she was born in Afghanistan. She wasn't. She's the child of refugees. She was born abroad. She thought she was born in Afghanistan. And it was a big news story that, we have a member of parliament, we have a cabinet minister who was born in Afghanistan because of the war there. Well, it turns out that she was not born in Afghanistan, as her mother told her whole life. She was born in Iran. I'm not sure why this, same idea. It's the symbol of someone in Canada being born in a hostile country but considering themselves Canadian, But this became a big deal that, as people are wont to do in this age of outrage, they couldn't leave it at, okay, her mother told her something that wasn't true. It got ramped up to she deliberately lied on her citizenship application, and therefore she should be deported. She shouldn't be in government. She should be kicked out of the country because she lied to immigration, And the thing about migrant peoples, the thing about people fleeing war, the thing about people fleeing bigotry and stigma and all this stuff is that this is not an unusual circumstance. Sometimes parents do lie to protect their children. I know on one side of my family, my ancestors covered up our Irish roots to pass better in England. On the other side of my family, my grandmother, her mother died when she was quite young. Her father remarried and they passed for Catholic, even though, my grandmother's mother was Jewish. In the 1930s in England, there were reasons for this, but still they were deliberately hiding an element of their heritage to pass. But this is very interesting because she had this scandal and Trudeau kept her. Mariam Monsef, and I think she was treated unfairly, so I'm glad to see her get a second chance to be effective and show those merits and not be defined by these issues of identity that should matter a lot less than we make them nowadays. Francophone, International Minister of Trade. Karina Gould is notable. She moved into Mariam Monsef's old portfolio because she is the youngest cabinet minister. She's only 29 years old. So she's going to have a big mountain to climb ahead of her because, again, a lot of people are going to underestimate her. But she is part of this youthful vitality, this forward-looking brand that the Trudeau government has sort of embraced. And, of course, our Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship is a gent by the name of Ahmed Hussein, who is from Somalia originally. And this is so Canadian, in a time where, on the same day, a Senate hearing to confirm the Attorney General of the U.S. and, Jeff Sessions is pro-life, meaning anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, resisted, the access to voting. Oh God, there's pretty much no minority group in the U.S. he hasn't offended. He's anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican immigrant, essentially. There's all this stuff about him. Canada goes and appoints a brown guy from Somalia with a clearly Muslim-sounding name as Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. And this is a huge symbol that we do not see Muslims as the other. And as someone who lives from walking distance from a mosque, I can tell you that this is a big part of the urban Canadian identity. Not so much the rural areas that aren't as multicultural. I prefer the term multicultural to diverse, personally, in this instance. But, our pharmacist is an Arab guy. I tweeted an article yesterday about a comedian that we happen to know. He worked on a show my husband worked on. He's Pakistani, culturally Muslim. He's not practicing religious Muslim, but he does identify culturally as Muslim. Muslims to us are not the other. They're not some potential terrorists. They're not people who should go back to where they came from. They're our neighbors. They're our friends. They're Canadians. And part of this is because we accept the studies that say that if you want people to integrate, you have to let them integrate. You have to let them feel like they're a part of society. And there's very compelling evidence that part of the reason that Europe is having so much trouble is that these Europeans of Arab descent, these Europeans who are Muslim, constantly felt like second-class citizens, because the bizarre thing is a lot of these people committing these acts are not migrants. They're people who were born in places like Belgium, in France, and they never felt like they belonged. So they're marginalized, and you get all these problems that come with marginalization. So in Canada, we go out of our way to do things like appoint a brown guy to Minister of Immigration. I believe he actually is Muslim, but I could be wrong about that. But, we do things like this to show people that you are Canadian. Trudeau opposed a niqab ban on the grounds that you cannot trade one form of perceived oppression for another form of forced behavior. If a woman wants to take off her niqab, it needs to be her choice. She shouldn't be forced to do it. And he won. And he also said, we don't have old stock and new stock Canadians. We don't have two tiers of Canadians. We just have Canadians. And he won. Multiculturalism is a big part of the Canadian identity. Pluralism is a big part of the Canadian identity. Breaking down those tribal barriers between people. This is part of the Canadian identity, because instead of it being, a war between the French and the English one winner take all, the reason we have French majority provinces like Quebec is because when Wolfe beat Montcalm, it wasn't utter destruction. We have major issues with how we treated our Indigenous peoples. It was disgusting what happened to Indigenous Canadians under the residential schools. And this is something we're still trying to make right. It is the slavery of Canada. We're just honoring a woman on our currency who was the victim of segregationist and racist, systemic segregation and racism in a movie theater. Viola Desmond is going to be on the Canadian $10 bill. She was convicted of a crime, essentially, I believe, tax fraud, because she wanted to sit in the white section of a movie theater in 1946. There was a higher fee to sit in premium seats in Nova Scotia movie theaters, and those seats were only available to white people. They didn't charge and convict her for sitting in the white section. They convicted her for tax evasion because she didn't basically pay the 1 cent luxury tax assigned to the floor seats on the theater where only white people could sit. It's a real education of the kindly genteel face that racism can take sometimes. So Canada's not a perfect country, but we seem much more prepared to accept these flaws so we can do something about them. But we're also, I think, in general, gentler to each other than other nationalities are. And I think that's an important thing to think about when you look at the cabinet shuffle. This is, you'll notice the appearance of the people who were moved out of cabinet and the appearance of the people who were moved into cabinet. I don't think that's an accident. And as much as some people might take issue with this, in fact, I know people do take issue with this, this is a good thing, because it's not like the people who are being moved out are left without a job. Some of them took the alternative appointments as ambassadors and things like that. And ambassadorships are pretty cushy jobs. I don't know how an MP does constituent work as an ambassador, but we'll find out. Some of them have chosen to perhaps move on to roles outside of government. We don't know what's going on. This just happened today. But it's not the kind of system where if you're in, you're out, like some other places. So I wanted to give this little snapshot into Canada because it doesn't seem like people really understand a lot of the things that happen in Canada. And there's this weird caricature of Canada with like Mounties and moose and beaver and maple syrup and all that stuff. And yeah, we have all these things. But we're a modern, country with modern technology, and we don't all live in igloos and log cabins, like it. And so I think that as a Canadian who has my own YouTube channel, I can do whatever I want. I think it's important from time to time to sort of give people a glimpse into our system and why some of the things happen, because I see some of the reporting from non-Canadian sources and even some screed-like Canadian, partisans on issues in our country, and people get a very warped view, the same way they did, when Trudeau made a campaign promise about gender parity in cabinet and then executed that campaign promise, made good on that campaign promise. People treated it like political correctness. It was, this, that, and the next thing. It should be about merit. And I was quite taken aback by that, because this wasn't one guy deciding to be politically correct. This was an election issue that Canadians had an opportunity to vote on. And we elected the guy that made that promise. It was not something he just unilaterally decided to force on the country. He let us choose as a country whether that was something he wanted. So all those people who mocked Trudeau's decision to do that were actually mocking the will of the Canadian people. And that is mocking a democratically derived decision. The same way Donald Trump is president, like it or not. And we can debate the merits of his decisions, but he is president. The American people spoke. So this whole not my president thing, yes, he is. I get what you're saying. I get it's not literal. But yes, he is your president, for better or for worse. Just like Stephen Harper was our president for years. Sorry, prime minister, for better or for worse. You don't have to like your head of state. You still have to acknowledge he or she is your head of state. Okay? Like, come on. And these are the things that we need more discussion on. These are the things we need to be more nuanced about. Because otherwise, all this screaming is just going to drown out any logic, and all this mockery is going to override good sense. And I think there is general consensus that racism is bad, sexism is bad, any form of bigotry is bad. The real questions facing us is, how do we define these things? What constitutes racism, sexism, bigotry, as opposed to just a dislike of an individual based on the merit of that person's achievements and character? What does it actually look like? What do we do about it? How do we solve this problem? That's where the disagreements are. And we can't solve hate with hate. We can't solve cruelty with cruelty. You solve cruelty with kindness, and you solve hate with maybe not love. Love sounds hippy-trippy, but you solve hate with understanding. You solve hate with empathy. And so this loud, hectoring classes, this chattering that goes on, and it is driven by the media. The media has a lot of blame for where we've ended up with in terms of our discourse. This doesn't solve a damn thing, because all you're doing is telling other people to solve your problems. So my attempt to educate people on political things happening in Canada when they are relevant, when they are significant, is my part of just providing information. The whole idea of a debate has been co-opted to just be propaganda, dueling propaganda. And so no, I don't do those, because I don't think they take us in a good direction. So for all those people that, why don't you debate somebody? That's why. It's got nothing to do with the person and everything to do with the format. I'm more than happy to have a discussion with people where we can sit down and have a few laughs and talk about soft subjects as well and see each other as human beings, even though we disagree. I will not be dragged down into these dehumanizing scream fests that have replaced debates on the internet. And not just our media, but our post-secondary education institutions should be absolutely ashamed at their complicity, at the way they have aided and abetted the reductiveness, the slow slide into the bad parts of populism that we are experiencing today. Our so-called thought leaders did not lead. The people who are supposed to guide us did not guide. The people that were supposed to be the best of us behaved poorly. And that is the reason that everything is so angry and shouty and blowy up right now. It is no single person's responsibility. It is the abdication of responsibility by thousands, if not millions, of people who were empowered to do the right thing, to make changes, and chose not to. They chose to score political points and do the safe thing instead. And so we need real leadership, and I applaud the risk-taking and the forward-thinking of the Trudeau government, and at least their desire to try to be better, even though they don't always succeed, and even though they've done some things that I really do disagree with. I think that they are at least trying to do something beyond just shoring up their base and raising money. And yes, his opponents are trying to take his biggest strengths and make them into weaknesses by questioning his vacations and all this stuff. I believe it's important to question our leaders. I believe it's important to keep an eye on things. Watchdogs are important. But things like the birthering of Maryam Monsef and trying to use tactics that were effective against Hillary Clinton, against Justin Trudeau, no. No, I don't like those, and I'd like the Conservative Party to start trying to solve some of the problems facing Canadians instead of just taking these stupid political potshots. Grow up, guys. You want to earn the trust of voters back after the Harper years and the Senate scandal? Start acting like adults instead of bullying teenagers. But I'm starting to rant, and I'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.